So it's under, it looks like it's going to be under KT outside. I did just post that 30 minutes ago in the event, but I don't know how to make it show up on the event, Jerry. Maybe you do. But hopefully people will find us when it pops up.
Yeah, I think we'll just share the link in there, and I'll share it on my page and various pages. But yeah, don't worry. Like I didn't even know Zoom had a Facebook Live feature until like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and this is just my second try at it. I told Mel that I had the first try, I tried to do a whole PowerPoint and everything, but it was just too much going on. I'm hoping to pay a little more attention to Facebook if there's comments or questions and all. Welcome everybody. My name's Kristen Thomas, and this is a SUP-centric discussion. We are going to talk about diversity in stand-up paddleboarding today, and so many issues and thoughts around that. And the generous people who I'm really proud to have here today are all people that I have worked with in one way or another in stand-up paddleboarding, and we've had discussions about diversity and access and inclusion and equity. So excited to talk about that today. Not sure where we will go with it, but it's just, I think, so important to be having these discussions and talk about things. My background is mainly stand-up paddle racing. I've been doing that for 10 years, which has led me to meet so many wonderful people and go amazing places. And then since 2012 through this past April, the beginning of COVID, I was the executive director of the Industry Association. Not something that I came up with the idea for, but that got me very involved in sort of the business side of stand-up paddleboarding. I'm going to have everybody here, Mel, Meg, Anthony, and Jerry introduce themselves, and then we'll get talking. But thanks for those of you listening. We would love to hear from you too if you have questions. A little later on, if it works, I think we're going to try to invite you in if you'd like to share something about your experience or questions that you have or thoughts later in our little Zoom that's live on Facebook. So you go ahead, Mel.
Okay, great. Afternoon, everyone. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. Very honored to be part of this panel, and thanks again for hosting, Kristen. So my name is Mel Palmiano. I'm a Canadian that's currently residing in South Korea. The city is called Gangneung. I've been stand-up paddling since 2007, 2008, mostly just for fun because the surf here isn't very good, and being on a stand-up paddleboard, you just are basically able to get on the water for any condition. 2010, I started off a little stand-up paddleboard company called Pine Ocean, basically just trying to get equipment out to the population and try and promote the sport and the lifestyle. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
How about you, Meg?
Well, thank you. Thanks for asking me to join. I also don't feel like I'm an expert, but I certainly, that never stopped me from having opinions. And I'm super happy to talk about these things and also listen to what other folks have to say. I live in Nashville. I founded Nashville Paddle Company in 2012. We teach people to stand up paddleboard and rent and teach paddleboard yoga and rent and paddleboards and kayaks on a lake right outside of Nashville. We have not been open this summer due to concerns over COVID, but that's temporary. We'll be open again in May. And we also, for a number of years, ran the Music City SUP race here. And obviously our specialty is flat water paddling, and part of our mission is to make paddleboarding accessible to folks who wouldn't otherwise be exposed to the sport. And whether that's folks who don't think of themselves as athletes and don't necessarily feel comfortable with learning a sport, or school kids, other kids who might not have the opportunity to come out. So that's really been our mission. Part of our mission is to make paddleboarding accessible to folks who wouldn't otherwise to the sport, and whether that's folks who don't think of themselves as athletes and don't necessarily feel comfortable with learning a sport, or school kids, other kids who might not have the opportunity to come out.
There's a little bit of a delay, Kristen. So if you're watching the Facebook Live, you're probably about 15 seconds behind.
Okay, thank you. Learning all this. Yeah, I'm trying to watch both only for the comments.
Here's a pro tip. Here's what I do. So like I use my phone for the comments, and then like yeah, and then I turn the audio down on my phone.
Cool.
Again, like I'm just like working through all this like a few weeks, like just from
Yeah. You
It's
do
like
use it. I've learned from you because you're on live and stuff quite a bit.
Well, because it was just because of COVID, because like I have started doing a podcast but in a studio, and then COVID happened and I was like, okay, I got to adapt. So I'm like learning the tools more.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry about the delay. Meg finished, right? Jerry, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm like I guess like I call myself like a paddle journeyman. So like I do like like I want to be like the best paddler I can be, and just explore the world paddling and stuff. But I got involved with SUP in 2012. I worked at summer camp in Texas, went paddling rented a board on the Brazos River in Waco in Texas. And I was like, this is sick. Like to be able to like stand up and paddle, and for the full body workout and the glide was just amazing, and see all the sights and not be low, and just be at my height. And it was just amazing. Because I had some kayaking, canoeing background. And then I've been on, did some surfing a little bit in New Jersey where I grew up, partly. And then like, I just got stoked on it. So it was 2012. And then after I graduated from college, I was telling a friend about this the other day. There's a guy, owner of Chuck Whitecap SUP down in Georgia. And I was like, look, I'm a, broke college grad. I can't buy a board, but can I pay you some money for a board for like an extended loan? And he was like, basically like, kid, don't worry about it. He's like, he gave me this SUP ATX big dumb board, 12.6 plastic board. And he just like let me have an extended loan for several months with it. And so I just threw it in my car and I paddle up and down the Savannah River, Augusta Canal, and all that stuff like that. And I just stoked on it. And so anyways, fast forward, like my thing, I guess, like in the industry or community, I started the Kentucky Waterman Series, which is now known as the Waterman Series, this competitive paddle sports racing series. And then also in college, I started a big movement called Explore Kentucky Initiative. So it promotes outdoor creation around the state. And I'm also an ACA instructor in stand-up paddleboarding and canoeing. So that's like my deal with SUP. And I've been trying to basically spread it to Black and brown folks and rural Appalachian folk in, our region, because traditionally SUP is like the way it's marketed. It's like big blue water, palm trees, and sand. But, yeah. So anyways, that's me.
That's fantastic. And Anthony Vela.
Hello, I would introduce myself as a stand-up paddle athlete, coach, enthusiast, fan. I've been lucky enough to do races all around the country and world. I've raced in Tennessee. I've raced in various river races, surfing events, racing events. I love all of the different aspects of stand-up paddling. That's what I think is really cool about it. And currently I help organize and am involved with some of the largest events around the world, and as well as some local events, and coach the Performance Paddling Training Club, and do a lot of private coaching as well to intermediate to advanced level stand-up paddle racers and surfers. And I'm half Black and half Mexican. So I think that adds a whole interesting approach to this sport, because I would say, and I have often had it said to me, that I don't really look either. And a lot of people are always very interested in what nationality I am. It's a question that I get asked a lot, because I don't necessarily have features of either of my ethnicities, but I have features of lots of different ethnicities around the world. And so people always say, oh, I thought you were this, I thought you were that. I say, oh, thanks for the compliment, because I think there's lots of different awesome ethnicities that have dark people. And so I'm proud to have led the life that I've led in a predominantly white environment, growing up swimming, becoming a LA County lifeguard for 20 years, and now in stand-up paddling.
you forgot the word professional. The other things I know you have done and more. So one of, the legends, but also right now, just very, very active in the sport in so many ways. He's my coach too. So Mel, I think we'll start with you because I got to interview you a few weeks back and you brought up diversity and your kind of concerns about how, stand-up paddling, we agreed that it's this amazing sport that's so versatile. It's one of the most versatile watercrafts. It is in the water spectrum. And we say that it's for everyone and it's for all ages. But what about representation and how does it look in the media? So can you share a little bit about your experiences with kind of the brands and the marketing and the media? And
Okay,
what you're thinking?
Sure. For me, it was like I mentioned, it was always just about getting on the water. And when living in South Korea, we don't really get as much swell because Japan seems to get it all in terms of the swell coming from the Pacific. So they block off all the waves. But I just remember seeing an old podcast just from like the guys in Hawaii, like an old like Tommy Stokes Hawaiian podcast, and all the guys from like C4 out in Makaha, like just with like these big 12-foot SUPs, and just going, wow, that's like the best thing ever. So I mean, the first board I got was basically an inflatable Uli board from C4 Waterman. Partly because I live in an apartment and I didn't know if I could get like a 12-foot board up the staircase or into the elevator. So I got this inflatable, which I basically learned on. It was actually not the best because it had this weird inverse rocker the way it folded. So anytime you try to catch a wave, you would suck the nose down. But I mean, it was still like the best thing in the world. So for me, it was just a matter of just seeing this new sport and just wanting to try it. I mean, there was nothing in terms of like, who's doing it. I think anybody who likes water sports is just going to get involved no matter what. No matter who's involved, they're just an innate thing about being involved with water sports.
For the full body workout, it was just amazing, and see all the.
Nope.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so basically, it was only in a matter of years later, like when the sport really got big, and then of course there's all the the magazines, obviously like things like Instagram, Facebook, that eventually you start seeing the images which don't necessarily represent what's actually happening in real life. Like I would always go back home to Vancouver and join like the Vancouver SUP Challenge and a whole bunch of the Tuesday night races that are out in Deep Cove. And you would have like a bunch of different people, different nationalities, different races paddling. But when you actually saw the stuff that's on social media, the image was completely different. So, I mean, I used to subscribe to a couple of the SUP magazines for a few years. And then after a few years, I'm like, geez, it's kind of, nothing is really changing in terms of, like what Jerry was saying, like people just think this is the image of SUP. It's like palm trees, blue sand, and just, the image is just all the same. So I basically canceled my subscription, partly because, it just kind of got boring seeing the same things and not learning about different cultures and different things. So, I mean, it's a little bit different for me because obviously I live in South Korea. So there isn't much of a difference in terms of the ethnicities of people. But I mean, I keep up with a lot of the stuff that's going on in North America. And then that's the thing. It was just always the same sort of images. Like even now, if you go to any of the Instagram accounts, any of the brands, any of the magazines, it's all the images are all the same people, same body type. And it kind of just, it was disconcerting for me, because if we're trying to really grow this sport and say that it is for everybody, how come I'm not seeing this in any of the social media, which again, social media is such a big part in terms of promotion. So it really just kind of, and it's kind of been bothering me for a few years now, and just recently again. And obviously with the way things are happening, in particular in the US and with the race relations and everything else, Obviously paddleboard sports is a small thing compared to what is actually happening in real life to people. And so I think, again, for you to bring this topic up and to have us join and discuss it, I think it's a good opportunity to sort of just bring up this topic for people to discuss in a civil setting. So yeah, that's essentially what spurred me on to kind of.
Thanks. Well, I think we can make a call out to media and brands, because I have to say, in my experience when I was at the industry association, I saw it's the smaller businesses that I saw really representing who was coming out and getting on their boards. And it was families, and it was people with a dog, and it was people of all different shapes and sizes, and it was men and women, and it was people of color. And it was not enough of that. And we're going to talk about that too, about access and bringing more people into it. But even representing right now, the magazine, this is today's magazines that we got, and they both are representing, what's going on in the United States. And I feel like in stand-up paddling, I haven't seen any change in any media. Like, I don't see it reflecting what I feel like has strongly come up right now, and it's the perfect time to be doing that.
Kristen,
And-
can I
yeah,
sorry.
absolutely. Please jump in. Anyone.
I was going to say, a big issue is that talking about it is contentious in our community. It's very extremely contentious. Like, people, because our sport is in a silo, it's very niche. And I'm going to talk frank, because our sport, and I would say, when I talk about the sport, I'm saying from my perspective in mainland North America. I know, like, around the world, it's probably more diverse, with, more of Asian Pacific folk that are in it, that originated the sport. But like the mainland America, it's mostly white folk. And when you try to talk about like diversity, equity, and inclusion within this space, people get offended by it. It's like as if you're saying, I think it's because they think that you're saying they are doing something wrong. And it's not necessarily that you're saying they're doing something wrong. You're saying, like, we're recognizing a disparity because we have this awesome, beautiful activity, and we have this beautiful water, and we have, most of the world's population lives, only a few miles from a waterway. So why aren't we getting more people on the water? And people don't let these conversations go on, and it gets hot. And it's been on my mind because, like, I talk about it, quite often because it's important, and people are like, it's divisive, it's not helping and stuff. So I'm glad that you're providing this mainstream like space to do it, like someone, being a good ally and holding space for people of color to talk about it. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks. And I think those are excellent points. And it is very challenging to have some of these conversations sometimes, but that doesn't mean we should not try. And it's interesting, the take that people think they're doing it wrong when it's just pointing out a disparity. I mean, we can be better, as we've been saying. And that's kind of a life philosophy. I think some people don't like change and don't want to be told things should be different than they are because things are just right for them right now. So Meg or Anthony, any comments about that, kind of that bigger picture of how media portrays SUP in terms of, I say the others, because I throw women in that too. Margaret and I have had conversations about that 51%, they say, of the buying power in stand-up paddling is females, at least in North America. And I was part of early Title IX, where my first coach in high school didn't want to have a girls team, so it's like, it's not that far back that some of these things have happened and have changed. It's been in my lifetime, and we'll talk more about it. But I mean, access to water and everything in North America has been crazy for people of color, which was something new to me. I heard Surfrider actually did a piece with surfing organizations. And how do you say the acronym BIPOC? How do you pronounce it? Black and Indigenous people of color? Do you say BIPOC?
I'll be honest.
Say
like,
the whole.
I talked about this a few weeks ago on my Facebook. I was like, I don't particularly like the acronym because it's like, I'm just black. But no. I'm saying, like, it's to each their own, but I think so I don't know. It's so funny how it popped up. I'm like, man, I'm black. I'm black. I didn't even know about this.
That's what Mel said too. He said, what acronym? I said, well, I see it all the time, but I've never heard it said. Yeah, just trying to acknowledge, and especially, I mean, Mel's Canadian, we're indigenous people in Canada and North America. I think they're trying to include in that, but it is sort of a mouthful. So thank you for that correction.
Oh no, what's a correction? I think, I mean, I was just saying, like, it's just so funny. Like
Yeah.
I've talked to like a lot of folk of color, black folk, and they're like, wait, where did this come from?
Well, it is interesting. I feel like I don't have the language. I mean, I'm older. I'm like your mom's age, Jerry, or maybe older than your mom. So like when you talk about being woke and all this stuff, like I don't have the vocabulary right now that my kids who are in their 20s and 30s do, you know. Trying though.
I think it's, I mean, like, I think we all, it's ever evolving. Like, I don't, you know, I don't think anyone of any age has all the vocabulary. It's just all evolving and holding space for people. I think that's what it is. So that's, yeah.
Well, thank you for holding space for those of us who are trying to learn. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what steps we take, but again, I don't think media and brands are intentionally missing people, but I do feel like, sorry, it's that Caucasian fit male is what dominates our media. And there are a lot, so there's different sides to that too. It's not just about portrayal, but also, you know, getting more people into it. But
I do think the representation, I do think there are a couple sides there, but the representation part, at least for us, has been tricky, because we want to have in our marketing and in the photos, whether we put them on social media or in our brochures, we want that to be a diverse group of people. But I also don't want to engage in tokenism, and I don't want to just, you know, automatically put, if a few people of color come out one day, automatically put them, you know, in our flyer or brochure. And so that's something that that we're really cautious about. And I suspect that some of that happens in the media as well, is that you don't want to feel like you're just checking boxes in what you include, but you also, I do think that representation is important. And I do think that's one small piece of how we get more diversity into the sport, is to show where it is diverse. And so I do think that's tricky.
yeah. Anthony, any thoughts on that, kind of that bigger picture? Because you are so involved in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think first it has to come from the heart and kindness of people. And, you know, like yourself, for doing what you're doing now and the conversations you've had with myself and everyone on the panel. And, you know, Mel, you're going to have to renew your subscription to Stand Up Journal, because if they changed ownership about a year and a half ago, and their new owner, Evelyn, I've had several conversations with her about this particular topic. And I know the next issue is going to be an issue where she talks about these things and is using her platform to bring up subjects like this. But it has to come from your heart first. And I believe Evelyn has a kind heart, and so that she's conscious of the problems that are going on in the world and in our country now, as is Kristen. And I'm not saying it's necessarily bad the way that other people or businesses do things, but if they're not conscious of it in their hearts and in their minds, they're not going to go out and proactively try to include other people. And it's not necessarily like, you know, they're doing it on purpose or anything, but you have to purposefully look into yourself and figure out what you want to represent with your businesses. And, you know, like for the most part, like people just want to just go with what they're doing. And it's very hard. And like Jerry said, contentious if you do bring up these types of things. And so hats off to people and businesses and platforms like Stand Up Journal and Evelyn, who are going out of their ways to bring up subjects that not everyone wants to talk about. Not everyone wants to hear it. And honestly, she'll probably lose viewership and readership because of bringing these things up, but she's willing to take that risk to bring up things that are close to her heart. So
No.
I also think that it's somewhere where those of us who are outfitters and, you know, have some business influence can exert some influence. And certainly when we started our business, I looked at the ways that businesses were representing women, and if they weren't showing women at all, or women of all body types, and not, depicting women, as people who paddle versus sort of ways to show off a board, that helped determine which manufacturers I was going to work with. And I think there's ways that we can have these conversations with manufacturers and with brands, and continue to sort of encourage them through our words and through our dollars to make changes.
Really good points. Yeah.
I think,
So,
I it's interesting, and not to be, I'll be honest, I get nervous like talking about this stuff, because like because people make you feel not so good about it. But it seems like it's with women's issues in our sport, it's okay to talk about it. Like, well, no. Let me back up. It's becoming more accepted. I remember like a couple of years ago, like there was some big initiatives. It was around like Red Bull heavy water. There was a paddle for equality, like diverse, or paddle for equality for women's pay and stuff like that. And I remember like people were going ham, people were going in on the women that were advocating for it. But slowly but surely, it was more accepted. Still not quite full 100%. I would say maybe like 70%. But like for issues for people of color, Black people, it's like, whew, it's not as, and it's not as accepted. And I would say like, and I think we have to think about like, why is that? And that's one thing that I've been trying to like really sit on and stew on, like why.
Really
Why?
good point. And
Do
I do
you
feel
have
like
answers
yeah.
or theories as to why?
Me, I think it's because it's easier. So or not easier. It's more. I think it's a race thing. So like, I think that people. Okay, so I think that there's. Okay, here we go. I think that there are some implicit biases. I think that people think that Black people don't per se want to get out in the water. They're like, oh, Black folk just, because I hear it and I see it on my social media when I talk about it. Oh, Black people just like to barbecue. Black people are afraid of the water. They don't swim. All the yada, yada, yada. Whereas like people see like white people as natural born, go to the water type folk. And then also there's what the community makeup. The community makeup is, majority white folk, mainland America. So it's easier to be like, okay, we're going to actively recruit people that are adjacent to the people already in the community, versus doing that deeper outreach. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, and I do think there have been efforts by women, and in terms of paddling, we do have representation in numbers. So that's, to me, what I see as the huge difference, is that women, here's this water sport that for the first time there might be more women than men. There's never been any water sport, is my understanding, that has had that. So we had that platform to take a step forward on, and there has been some proactivity. So I don't want to focus as much on that, and I'm sure Meg agrees. And I do think let's move into North America and what's happening with awareness and people of color, and how do we use that in stand-up paddleboarding. At least I think we all share that goal, to get more people stand-up paddleboarding and doing this thing that we love, especially those who haven't before. And I think I'm going to back up. Anthony, you've had a lifetime of being a waterman, and I know your story would be an hour and 45 minutes if you told us the whole thing. But maybe you can, where have you run into things as someone who was a swimmer and a lifeguard, and you've lived in Australia, and where have you felt the fact that you are a person of color, or you're half Black, half Mexican?
Everywhere, every day. I mean, every time you go to the water, it's something that's, it's just around you everywhere. And we're not that far removed from, Jerry brought up some of the things that people bring up about Black people. And, it was, as late as like 1969, where there are medical studies that talk about why Black people can't swim. It's because their bones are more dense. It's because they're not as buoyant. And these are like proven medical facts, right? And you think, it's hundreds of years ago when these types of misnomers were out there. But I mean, that's just the next generation. My parents grew up in a time where it was medically proven. You grew up in a time that, you know, that we couldn't swim. I remember going to an event in New Jersey, and I was it was 2001. I was a current Ironman champion for Surf Lifesaving. Ironman's an event where you swim, prone paddle, and surf ski and run in between. And it was this huge event for big prize money after the Lifeguard Nationals. And they did all these bios about people and took pictures and had this full program. We're talking 2001. And my bio didn't talk about, you know, the 7 consecutive paddleboard championships in California, being the current Ironman champion, being the current this or that. Everyone else has had their stats. All mine said was Anthony continues to break down the notion that Black people can't swim. That was my bio in 2001 for this big event in New Jersey. And so, you know, people always ask, like, do you encounter racism? Yeah, pretty much every day. But if you try to tell the story about it, they always shrug it off with, oh, well, that's just this or that's just that. And I think that's the whole problem is no one really understands how you feel except someone who feels the same way. And so having conversations with people to try to help them understand how you felt, or maybe, you know, 2 people can take the same incident and see it from 2 different perspectives. And that's the thing that creates, you know, our lives. And so I think that we all have a unique perspective, and it just takes people to continue to talk about it and share their story, and people to listen. Most people don't want to listen. And, you know, in traveling the world and, you know, countries that I've been to in water sports, and I mean, there's bias in not just America, but, you know, in England, I heard a stat, 80% of Black people can't swim, don't know how to swim in England. In South Africa, obviously, apartheid, you had problems. In Australia, there's Aboriginal people. When I lifeguarded there and I had my hair really big, and, you know, people thought I was Aboriginal, and they were so perplexed when they pull up to the beach and I'm the person that's there to protect them. And they were, you know, wow, how did you learn how to swim? Oh, actually. And so I think it's just, we encounter it every day, and it's just a matter of having people that are open-minded enough to talk about it and to listen to other people's perspectives, and people to proactively go out and talk about these conversations, even though they're difficult, and share their opinions, even though they may lose buyers, readers, clients, or whatever it is, because that's the time that we're in. And I'll just, you know, pass it over by saying, like, it's really awesome. Now you mentioned what's going on here, to see you have this small group of people who don't want to change, but I feel like you have a larger group of people that are coming together to seeing all the paddle outs for surfing that typically are used for when somebody dies. But now they're having these paddle outs all over the world with Black people, white people, people of all different ethnicities coming together to show that, hey, we're all looking for equality. So,
yeah, to your point, Anthony, I did one here in Kentucky. It was actually because of Kristen. Kristen gave me the inspiration. So I saw on Kristen's Facebook a paddle out for George Floyd, I believe. I'm thinking, and so I was like, because I was just I was soul searching. I was like, oh my God, like my emotions were like everywhere. And I was like, okay, Explore Kentucky, Waterman Series, paddling. What can I do? And then like this happened, and people say like, oh, social media is not good for anything. Social media is great for a lot of stuff. So I just happened to be scrolling the thread, and I saw on your thread you attended an event. I think you tagged me in it or something like that. And then I was like, okay, that's what we're doing. So we did the paddle out, Black Lives Matter paddle out Kentucky at Fort Boonesboro State Park on the beach there. We had about 60 people attend. We had speakers talking about diversity and inclusion and talking about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud. It was beautiful. And then we had the community bring paddle boards and kayaks. Anyone could borrow, like, free boats to borrow. And then we did, you know, we did a circled up for 8 minutes, 46 seconds. And then we had a community paddle, and it was dope. And it was like to be a part of that, like, you know, that worldwide movement, you know, oh gosh, it was awesome.
Well, and I have to thank Erin. We did have one together in Laguna Beach here of Sunset Paddle. So she's a paddle instructor here in Laguna, and she had gone to one in San Diego that was huge. You probably saw that aerial photo where they had used the surfboards to write unity. So that picture has been one of the ones that really, so how cool is that it like, you know, we were inspired by that and you were inspired by this one, and that's the kind of thing that brings us together to have these conversations and hope to keep the conversation going and keep growing this.
But
So yeah.
I was gonna say, Kristen, on the flip side though, it was beautiful, and you know, we had big news story out of it, but it produced a lot of negativity for me. So a lot of my people that go to my events and race events were really angry with me about it and messaged me about it afterwards, felt that I let them down and that I was just clout chasing for the moment and had ruined my brand and my platform. And it was like really, and it's still, the repercussions are, I mean, it's still happening. Like people are still upset with me about it. And then the news station, Lex 18, it posted an article, the clip, the story, and it was like nearly 800 vitriolic, well, not all, but it was an 800 comment section, and a lot of it was like racist, vitriolic comments. And so like there was the positive that came out of it, but it was a lot of negative, and it was just interesting.
Yeah, hard to know what to say about that. I'm sorry, but also thank you for standing up and doing something. I mean, you and Meg, I mean, you are in, I guess Kentucky gets divided, right? I mean, you're in the South.
Yeah, it's
Although
not
I
like,
saw a whole debate on whether you are the South or not, right? Your state's kind of.
I don't know if it's just like a South thing, because I think it happens all around the country. Like my friend Margot, who's watching from New Jersey, you know, like
we love her.
in New Jersey, they had like, you know, like up north, like, you know, well, all around the surf area, surf Nazis. So it's just, I don't think it's endemic just to the South, but yeah.
Yeah, you're right. We're in Southern California and we feel it here in Orange County where Anthony and I live. So
And
you're right.
I'd like to commend Mel as well. I saw his post that he did on his social media, just, you know, putting up different pictures of magazines and brands and just talking about it on his platform. And it takes a lot of courage to organize a paddle out, knowing you're going to get the repercussions. It takes a lot of courage for Melvin to put something out there like that. And for you, Kristen, for doing this, and Meg for being here. And, you know, just, I noticed on the day where it was the Blackout Tuesday, where people were posting black squares, and I wanted to see what people were saying to athletes that did this. And so I would look on certain surfers, all different athletes, and see what the comments were on their posts. There's an athlete in Southern California. His name's Griffin Colapinto, and he won the Hawaiian Triple Crown, which is one of the most prestigious surfing events you can win. And he was the first ever Californian to win it, which is crazy. And he's a young kid. He's like 19 years old. And he posted a black square. And man, this poor kid, you scroll through, he probably never looked at them, but the comments that he received for doing something simple as putting a black square to show support, it was crazy. And, you know, I think social media, there's a lot of good, but it allows people to just continue to bash people as well. And I felt so bad, so good that so many athletes were doing this, but then so bad, you click on it and you look at the comments, and most of the comments were not positive, like, way to go. They were like, what are you doing? We just want to see you surf, shut up and dribble, and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, it's just, most people don't want to hear it. And that's the whole reason why it's important to continue talking about it. So thanks, Kristen, and to all of you guys for doing what you do, and everyone.
Yeah. Well, stand-up paddling is small and is niche, but we are still growing. We don't seem to have the organizations. You know, again, I've been a little frustrated that I haven't heard these conversations. I went into Outdoor Retailer Virtual a little bit, and almost all of their main speakers and sessions were about the reality of what's happening. And I see a lot in kind of the outdoor world and some in water in terms of maybe grants that are offered, and some of them we're probably qualified for, and maybe we're not big enough to have those. But are there ways to tap into other sports, specifically water sports, to help grow this and help get more people involved who are of color or other groups that aren't represented?
Yeah, so I'll sorry, tongue tied. So like my background, you know, is like environmental education and branding and journalism. And representation is key. That's a simple one. That's a simple one. You know, like, so Explore Kentucky, my entity, has over 50,000 followers on Instagram. 50,000 people follow the crap that I do. Don't know why, but they do. And, you know, but people seeing me, and like, I was intentional about this when I was in college, when I started this Instagram account. I want people in Kentucky to see a Black man doing this stuff. And I think that's something that brands can easily do. And Meg hit on it, was like when she was, you know, deciding brands to work with, seeing like who was working with, had women and stuff. That's important. So I think it's like talking to, you know, not to call anybody out, but I'm just throwing it out there, like Starboard, Boat Boards, Infinity, whomever. Think about getting diverse people into your lineup, into your you know, your model shots and stuff. That's easy to do. That's not hard to do. So that's one thing, is diversify your branding.
I mean, I think for me, that's really what made me post stuff about that, was because of seeing the big brands. Like, I mean, for right now, like, again, if I've actually mentioned it to the board brand that I'm using right now. Like, I'm using Starboard. And I mean, I haven't implicitly posted the name up, but I have contacted the media outlets and people who are there. And I mean, for me, I love the fact that they're doing a lot of environmental initiatives in terms of the production and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of boards now are doing that, but that's what actually irked me, was I know that it's a big brand and then it's everywhere. Like, I mean, right now in Korea, I mean, I think with that recent virtual reality type event that the APP put, I mean, to see that the biggest school that had paddlers was actually here from South Korea. We had 21 paddlers. I mean,
That's cool.
And even like with all the races that have been around the world, like, I mean, I think Anthony knows that there's a lot of paddlers in Japan. And I don't see the particular brand promoting some of the paddlers from there. Like, I mean, and like Jerry said, it's just very easy just to put a couple of pictures of some of your paddlers or just the general population into your social media. And I did like, I mean, I'm not a stats guy, like I really hate math, but when I go through a lot of those pictures, I mean, I will count one out of maybe 100 images where there's a person of color or a different ethnicity. And so that's why for me, as far as the industry is concerned, you know, I always hear this sport is for everybody, but when you don't see it, I mean, I think there's a percentage of people who you have to kind of push to get involved, because personally, maybe there's something that they're scared about, or they just need someone to kind of get them to do something. And if you don't see it, that's an extra barrier that I think psychologically is there.
Absolutely. I think there's a name for it. I don't know what it is, Mel, but being able to see yourself in something, because we're all early adopters, but now we're at a different phase and it is growing, but people need to see themselves in, you know, and I don't know what that term is. Somebody take psychology, but I think there is a term for that.
I just say like representation.
Yeah, like Jerry said, like, I mean, like I put a hashtag diversity counts or representation matters. I mean, I think over the last few years, you've seen it. Like, I mean, even just as recent as, like, you know, the unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman. I mean, just seeing like a Black superhero or a person of color who was there. I think it affects people a lot. What was that called? That movie, Crazy Rich Asians. Like, I mean, I've never been a fan about, you know, romantic comedies, but I mean, I was like, what? This kind of like a Hollywood movie again, but just with Asian people. But I mean, I think it does hit you. Like, I watched it on an airplane because I wasn't going to go to a movie theater to watch it. But when I saw it, I was like, yeah, okay, I can see that. And there's a lot of parallels that you can see that, I mean, the stuff from that movie, like I've experienced it. Like, people see me and they think, you're not Filipino, you're Chinese, you're Japanese or stuff. So, I mean, for me growing up too, like Anthony was saying, like people kind of are surprised to hear like what? You don't look Filipino, or you don't look Canadian, right? So like, so for me, like when we had that interview, like I was lucky to be part of the Canadian team for the 2014 ISA SUP championships. And the main reason for me personally to actually do it was because, you know, I'm of Asian descent, and I don't see too many people of Asian descent representing like Canada. Like even growing up, when you see the Olympic team, I mean, other than maybe watching a few events like badminton or something where there aren't very many people of Asian descent on platforms like that, I felt like for me it was a good opportunity just to kind of join and show that as a Canadian, and even as in America, there are different people in America that are just not represented by like being Caucasian. So for me, it's more of
Yeah.
a personal matter, and I try to just kind of put in little bits to just sort of show, like, you know, there's other people that should be involved and included, and again, just as far as
Yeah.
representation.
So it does sound, I mean, representation kind of sounds to me like the low hanging fruit, and that we can do something about it. And we're calling out brands and media right now, and we can move forward with that. But what about some of the deeper issues of that you mentioned, like notions that people of color can't swim, and how do we change perceptions? How do we get more people inner city access to water? Jerry, you've pointed out that waterways in at least North America are really close to almost everyone, but there's so many people who've never been in or on the water and don't learn to swim and don't that you know lead into paddle sports. I have seen some grants and things available to try to do that kind of thing. I bet, Jerry, that you've probably tapped into some of that, but is there something we can do to help change perceptions, help improve access?
Yeah, I think so I want to say really fast, just plug this. Like they need to cut the check. No, I'm just kidding. But everyone needs to look at like what Me Undies is doing. It's an underwear company, but they have
Yeah.
diverse representation. They have black, white, Asian, trans, like everyone, big, tall, like in their and it's intentional in their marketing. So it's kind of cool, like what they're doing. But as far as I think the notions, I think it's, Kristen, the big thing is firstly to acknowledge it. That's the big thing. So like we talked about representation. Now we have to talk about acknowledgement. And I think that a lot of people don't acknowledge or know about that systemic or structural racism that exists. You know, like the example that I give, I've been given a lot, is like there's West Louisville, Kentucky, and you've been to Louisville. So I do a big, the Great Harbor Odyssey. It's a 22-mile and a 7-mile race, stand-up paddleboard, kayak, canoe, stand-up paddleboard race in Lake Ohio. The boathouse, so the boathouse facility, the community dock is on one side of Louisville. And then where the most of the black and brown low-income folk live, it's in West Louisville. That area, which is right adjacent to the river, where the government projects and housing and crap like that is, adjacent to the river, a major lock and dam system. There's no access point. There was no access point to the river until this year, 2020. Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife is working on the Western Louisville's first boat ramp. That's crazy. Now on the east end of the river, boathouses, rowing club, sailing club, yacht club, riverside restaurants, private access points, all that stuff. But so like I think we have to acknowledge that structural racism exists, and then from there think about how do we work on it. And so what our Metro Parks is doing is working with Fish and Wildlife for that boat ramp, but they're also making this thing called the Shawnee like Outdoor Center, which is going to have like a whole outdoor center, pond, all stuff like that. And I think people need to be, you know, I would encourage people listening and paddlers to audit your community, look at where your boat ramps are, look at where your access points are. Yeah, that's one thing. And then, you know, and Meg can really lobby or talk about this, is like talk to your state's Fish and Wildlife Office, state, representatives, local politicians, and really advocate for more access points.
But I think one of the things, sorry, Meg, but just to add on is with the access points, it wasn't on accident that there were no access points for the Black people. It was 100% on purpose. And it goes back to access to pools, access to swimming, to swim lessons. When public pools first started getting built, there was all sorts of laws in place to keep Black people out, and reasons why, because we would dirty the pool and all these Black people would, attack right there. Yeah. And then, as cities stopped building public pools, then it became private clubs, right? Where obviously, low income people couldn't afford to be a member of a high end club to be able to get the swimming lessons and have access to the pools. But then on a bigger scale, where our sport comes in and other water sports is, it wasn't just access to pools, it was access to beaches, it was access to rivers, it was access to lakes. So we have on purposefully been denied access to many, many things, and especially the water, because that is an area that's considered, I don't want to use the word sacred, but, people just didn't want dark-skinned people there. And that's just the way it is. So to acknowledge the facts of, obviously represent, but to acknowledge the fact that we have been denied access to these different points of entry to water is on purpose, and I think that's part of the whole thing. It's just, we're not saying that you, Kristen, or Meg, or any person that's not Black did it, it's your fault, but the fact that you guys are here and acknowledging it, this is the answer. And I think, like someone mentioned way in the beginning, is like, people think we're attacking someone individually. We're just identifying a problem that exists and trying to find a solution. So well done getting the access point and continuing to consult Fish and Game and all those points that you brought up. But and I was stepped in before you were going to say something, Meg.
Well, I think those are great points. I think it's important to underscore that it's not past tense, that we see all the time that, okay, there might be access points in this part of town as well as this part of town, but the ones over here don't have restrooms, or they don't have water fountains, or I could go on forever about the disparities between the access points in different neighborhoods, and that history, we see it play out. One of the things that we've tried to do is a lot of programs with kids in some of those neighborhoods, and then hope that way they could get excited and then bring parents and grandparents who might not have been exposed to the sport or think that they have access to the sport. That way, I will say that it's not been wildly successful to go that way. We don't get a lot of the kids back again and again, and I have some theories as to why that is, but it's something we'll keep trying, but it's not.
I'd be curious, Meg, to hear your theory. I have a thought, but I want to hear
Well, I would love your theories. I mean, part of it is just the way that we've done a lot of these programs is we've done them through the park district, which is great. And but so we're talking to the kids. We know the kids have a great time out there, but then we don't have a great way to follow up with the parents and grandparents. And so we can say, we'll figure out ways for you to come back, bring your parents, grandparents, your older siblings, your aunts, uncles, but we don't have a great way to follow up with them. And, it's tricky when you're marketing to kids. So that's something that I would like us to do better. The other thing is, I feel like we need to hire a more diverse workforce, because then that workforce can go talk to their communities in a way that I can't. And they'll have some entry into those communities and understand dynamics that I just don't know. And we're lucky in Nashville. We have Fisk, we have Tennessee State, some universities where we can recruit some staff. But I think that's our next big step, to be more intentional about the way we hire and then have those folks help us be more intentional about getting a more diverse population out to paddle.
Yeah, that's Meg. That's what I was gonna say. You hit on the theory that I had was like diversity in staff, because again, going back to representation, so people can see each other, but not just about representation, but what you said, the networking. The networking is like key. Because a lot of times, after like everything went down this summer, Black Lives Matter and the racial justice movement, a lot of people were reaching out to me across like, outdoor creation, like, hey Jerry, can we do this? Can we help get the kids mountain biking, black kids mountain biking, da, 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 da. And I'm like, look, we don't want to just like swoop in and do a one-off program. Okay, we put a kid in a canoe, we put a kid on a stand-up paddleboard, took the kids swimming. We did it. We want to build those hard skills. And so I think we have to be intentional about going to like a community center, going to the church, going to, historical Black colleges, and finding out who the OGs, finding out who the leaders are, community people, and then teaching them, and then having them replicate it, and using having them like make the movement theirs. And I think that's what a lot of sporting organizations don't get it. I don't know. That's, yeah. Sorry, I'm feeling like jumbly.
Yeah, well, there's
do you see that? Because I can tell you here that Vanderbilt has a great program to get their students in a kayak and on the water, and MTSU has a great program to get their students out on the water, but Tennessee State, to my knowledge, doesn't. Fisk doesn't. And so if those college students who might be great advocates for us and might be, they might come race, they might come work for us. You can just see on the college level that they don't have the same opportunities as the students who go to Vanderbilt do, or Belmont, or wherever.
Yeah, I'm going to add into that. You're talking colleges just because we've had a few comments about youth and getting youth in. And there's a movement towards AAU, which is a thing in the United States, and maybe being a part of that. And in this Olympic pursuit where we might be undersurfing, but that whole international feel, what Mel talked about was the ISA, I think that really helps build. And if we start them young, before college, and especially because all these issues with water, and I feel strongly that you should know how to swim to stand up paddleboard, so are we getting, everyone access to that? And so youth is brought up by quite a few people. Any thoughts on that, on kids and how young? I do think just
like
the
you
parents
said,
and grandparents are important too. But
I think the basis is really just swimming, but prior to that, obviously, is access to water. I think, even here for example, South Korea, where we've got a boom in surfing, it was surprising to know that a lot of people here don't know how to swim, and we live on a peninsula where we're basically surrounded by water. So I think the biggest thing, and is really getting kids and families comfortable being in the water. So if that can just lead to people understanding how the water works, especially, like rips and stuff like that, but just being comfortable being in the water, and then learning how to swim. Because I think that's going to be one of the bases for any sort of water sport, obviously. So if you can get people just to get in the water, whether they or not, they don't want to be in a boat and to paddle, but just to be there and be comfortable and feel that they belong, I think that's the biggest issue that we can sort of look at in terms of the youth. Because there's always going to be that kid who's just going to excel and just get into it. He's already a good swimmer or whatever. So I think, just for me, I've got 2 kids, and really for me, the biggest thing is just exposure. Like, I always think about the stuff that I wasn't able to do as a kid that I want to let them do. And then from there, if they enjoy it and they can excel in it, then yeah, then we'll do it. We'll support you. Like, my kids are into like skateboarding and surfing. Like, I'm not trying to push any of them into any particular thing, but I'm just trying to see, okay, well, what is something that you enjoy? Do you have a talent in that? And if you want to pursue it further, then we'll do what we can to try and get you to excel. And I think for all of us who are parents, that's really all we're trying to do for our kids, is just to give them an opportunity that we maybe never have had. And then from there, they can decide what they want to pursue. So in terms of this, then yeah, just getting people in the water, getting them comfortable, and then from there they can sort of follow their route as what they want to pursue. But it's
Yeah,
important to have the access.
I think Mel, what you said is eloquent and beautiful. And I think that we have to challenge those notions in our community because, like, so there's a thread on a friend's Facebook that went down a few weeks ago or last week, and it was like I didn't like what went on. It was basically talking about, hey, like he was talking about like he said like, hey, at my local state park, I see a bunch of black folks whizzing around on like high expensive bicycles, Cannondales, all stuff like that. So taking out the economic question, black folk can afford to, to do these things. Why don't we see black folks more in like paddle sports racing and stuff? And even though we took out the economic thing, someone was like, basically like, they just don't want to do it. And, they just can't afford to do it. And that was and I was like, wow. And I was like, or it's just like, they just, and the thing that really hit me was like, they just don't want to do it. And I'm like, it's like, Mel, what you said, like, if you expose somebody to it, it's 50-50 chance they might want to do it. And like, like everyone that I've taken on the board, see me on the board, like, oh man, I got to try that. That looks fun. I want to get out there. I want to be out there. I want to go that little island out there. And I think we have to encourage our community to challenge brands, community ambassadors, challenge the notions of what your implicit biases. One thing I think also that can help too, with Meg's issue with, getting kids keep going with it. And like, maybe y'all can speak to this more like the rest of y'all, because y'all have like, I'm pretty well traveled, but not as well traveled in like SUP. But I really feel, I lived in Germany as a kid. And these sports clubs, you had like, that was my first exposure to like K1s. Was you didn't necessarily have to own your boat, whereas in North America, you have a lot of people that own your boat. So I really think that boat houses are the deal. Me and Meg have talked about this sporadically over Facebook Messenger. I really think that boat houses are key. Like Chris Barlow up in San Diego, he was Olympian, and the San Diego Canoe Kayak Club, and that model is super dope. Like a boathouse, boats, SUPs, a nominal membership fee, and then kids and families have access. And I really think that's the key. Is if it was like my dream, every freaking city in America across the world would have a boathouse, have freaking over 100 boards, boats, and then like people could do it. That would be like my dream.
And I don't know, Anthony, yeah, I love that model. I think Australia kind of has that on the coast, that everybody belongs to a club or I don't know what they call them, but everybody has access to the ocean. It's just what you do. And I'm not sure if it's the same, if it's shared and everything, but I love the club concept. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, they're surf life-saving clubs, and it's just access to equipment like we're talking about. And it's, I think there's a lot of, I was actually talking with, someone about this the other day, just how it's liability, I think, here in the States versus other places. Or in Australia, I was actually talking with Michael Booth on the podcast where, they have the surf clubs, but if you go and take a board out and you hurt yourself, it's your bad. Here, if you go out to the, Dana Point Surf Club and you take a paddleboard out, you fall and you hit your head, and you can sue the paddle club, and then it's over. So I think what Chris Barlow has done, and places like NAC, and I think these are, one-offs that have been in existence for a long time. The location where they're at, the real estate where the boathouse would be. This is also a dream of mine, Jerry, because I've shared in this dream living in Australia and seeing what these kids have access to, where you can become proficient on a craft because you don't have to worry if he breaks, because it's not even yours. So it's not the $2,000 board that you're going to break of yourself. The club just gets a new one and fixes it, and you can go on progressing and not being worried to go out if the waves are too big or whatever that scenario is. And as far as like getting the kids involved, I think it's to get them not just to do it once, but to continue doing it. That's the big question. And as a lot to do with their parents and their parents' fear of the water, their parents' fear of swimming or drowning or, whatever the case may be. And it's, I think we're still like a generation away from, Black people being comfortable around the water. I mean, what was it like 2012 or 13 when those, I think it was like 6 Black kids in New Jersey or something. There was a river where one kid went in, jumped in to save. One brother jumped in, was in the river, slipped off the bank, and then like 4, 5 more brothers jumped in to save somebody. A white guy jumped in and saved one of the kids, but 6 other ones died. And we're talking, not that long ago. And so I think that fear gets, put into people's heads as well. And so more people become scared. So I think everyone that can bring people to the beach is great. And they used to have that Orange Bowl race in Florida where we'd bring out the Boys and Girls Club. And it's amazing how fast kids pick it up. You don't even have to, you just say, here's a paddle, here's a board. And there's always, you have a group of 10 kids, there's going to be one who's just like, whoo, 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 and they have the perfect stroke and they're fast. And then, you put them that's on a crappy board and a crappy paddle. You put that kid on a race board that same day and he feels the glide of a race board, guaranteed they're hooked, right? So it's just a matter of having that boathouse, having those shops that the people care enough to go and reach out and continue to work hard to get people involved. People like Mel who just take people out, not, to make $1 million from it, but just to get people as stoked on something as we are. And I mean, that's just it. It's just like, we want people to have that same feeling that we have when we're on the water, any body of water, river, lake, ocean, any craft, that's the key.
Well, I have a question to, how does how is that funded in like Australia and stuff? Because I know Chris was telling me at the ACAP Leadership Academy in like 2018, we were talking about it, and he was saying that basically, I guess like the San Diego Olympics is the only Olympics that made like money, and so like they were able to create a foundation, and then the money. But how in Australia, how is that fund? I know like in Britain they have British canoeing, which is like funded from the government. They get millions of dollars from the government. But in Australia, are those clubs funded that way too?
They're funded primarily from the government, and there's also this national body that helps, supplement the funding as well as memberships. And then there's a certain section of Australia where they're allowed to have like casinos and bistros where they sell food and stuff. So on the Gold Coast of Australia or in Queensland, they're able to actually sell things and create their own funding. So all of the top athletes from other states in Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, they're like the top in their club. And then most of them move to the Gold Coast because that's where the athletes are able to make money, because it's legal in Queensland to be able to sell, to have the pokey machines where you can gamble, and they have, bistros where you can sell food. So they create their own income in Queensland. The other states around Australia, they're funded just by local government and the national body. And that's where, that's the big fight right now is about SUP is to get that national IOC recognition, because then the funds start trickling down through the international federations and down into the local federations. And that's, the big key that you hit on is just funding and money. And that's, I think, the elephant in the room in the country around the world is it all takes money and effort and time. And I think with those things, it can happen. It's just, our sport's expensive. The access close to the water is expensive. Damaged equipment, all these things take time and money. But so I think this is all, everyone's got great input and ideas, and I love how we're spread all over the country and world. And I think this is like one conversation that will keep, spreading around. So, I know we're getting close to Melvin having to go, but Melvin, I just wanted to say thanks for your post that you did. And just for speaking up, and I really, appreciate it. And obviously, Kristen and Meg and Jerry, it's awesome to meet you. I look forward to continued conversations with you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So this is recorded, and I actually just started a YouTube channel, so I had a place to put these conversations so people can find them afterwards. But I don't know how long it stays on Facebook. Jerry, my tech guy, maybe But I hope it does spur more conversations and more activities. And there's no easy answer, but you definitely had some, representation, acknowledging the issue, and then, going deeper from there. I think we had a great start here.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I think it's the action now, is the taking the action. Yeah.
So
I think also too, as far as, sorry, Kristen, I think the one thing that I took out of this was basically, there's a lot of voices that go around, but a lot of times we tend to fail to listen and take a step back and just try and understand how the other person is feeling. Because we automatically tend to get this defensive step and then try and like punch back. And I think with everything that's going around again in the world and what's happening in the US, I think a lot of it is just everybody's so defensive that they don't try and take that step to empathize and listen to what other people, this stuff has been going on for years, right? Like, what Jerry is saying, what Anthony's been saying, this stuff's been going on for years. And you're going to expect a pushback. And if people were just to sort of, again, listen and allow people to represent, I think you'll have a little bit of an easier time. This is a tough time and it's going to take time. So, but again, with things like this, hopefully more people will listen and give people the opportunities. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And the four of you, if you have time, there were some great comments. Somebody just said it'd be great to have a safe forum where we can test ideas and share what we're trying to do. Like you said, Jerry, it can be really emotional and hard, and and not that we shouldn't have open conversations, but sometimes it's great to have a place to bounce things off people who are at least, listening and a little bit more in a like-minded place. So maybe we'll create something like that. But there were a lot of comments, not a lot of questions, but a lot of good stuff on Facebook that I hope if you get a chance to go back and look at. And again, my technology skills, I don't know how long all of that lasts, but
It should. It should stay up there for forever. It's like the live. But I want to say, Kristen, like, thank you for doing this. And I want to say to, what Mel said, yeah, it's important to hold space. For me, like personally, like I went through like, I had depression, this past year and within paddle sports, in the sense of like, I haven't paddled as much this year because my joy was taken away. When I looked at my SUP or my surf ski, I just didn't want to do it because I associated it with the community, like, some of the commentary I've met in the community, like really around the BLM paddle out, it really like just, it hurt me. And then some of the, I've been trying for years, I've been in this thing, since for a while, and I've been talking about these issues, and the people that, that I built the community around and for and stuff, and to have them, kind of push back on me, it really bothered me. And so I think that we need to, again, hold space for these conversations and create these affinity spaces. Like there's the Paddlers for Diversity page and some other things, but also to allow these conversations to happen in a mainstream, space. And, I would love to see, and I'm going to be bold and say, Evelyn's great. Evelyn, keep doing your thing. John Busang, Lisa Shell, Paddle Monster, and, do keep, y'all, can y'all help advance these conversations? All these board brands, can y'all do it? Yeah, we need to call out, and not in a bad way, but call out these mainstream platforms and encourage them, hey, can y'all share this video on your platform? Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Sorry, went over an hour. And Mel, it's tomorrow morning, our time for you, and you got to go get your kids.
Yeah, I gotta get Brandon to school.
Yeah. So we will stay in touch. Love to hear from you guys who are listening, as well as the panel about next steps and to Jerry's point, action and keeping going. Thanks all.
Great. Thank you
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much. Thanks
Nice
to all of
meeting
you.
everybody.
You too.
Have a great day.